Okay, so we looked at the basic overview of the system. I forgot to say things like, kidneys are from T12 to L2, but you guys should know all that from lecture so far. So let's look at cutting the kidney in a frontal section. Basically, you're just going to cut the kidney in half. And we're going to look at like what are the components of the kidney itself. And this is actually something that's probably on your lab activity that you've already done, but maybe you weren't quite sure how to actually draw on this thing and like what all these different things are. So we can kind of color code a couple of them. So one of the things is like this area right here is meant to represent some of the fat that surrounds the kidney, because remember, the kidney does things like gluconeogenesis, which is converting fat into sugar when your blood sugar levels dip. And then the outermost layer, I'm just going to kind of make this a dark, like reddish color. That's meant to represent the fibrous capsule. So you want to think about that. Okay. So remember, it's going to have a couple of different layers that are going to go around it that you want to double check. But the fibrous capsule is the superficial most layer that goes around the kidney. So we'll call that the fibrous capsule. You can also call it the renal capsule as well. So sometimes it's called the fibrous or the renal capsule. And I know there's another tissue that actually is superficial to that, which I've forgotten what exactly it is right now, but look it up in the lecture. Just make sure you know the layers, right? What is the next layer back behind the parietal peritoneum? And then what's the next layer that's superficial to the kidney itself? Well, the superficial one is the fibrous capsule. Okay. Then the next thing we're going to want to do here is we're going to draw our internal components of the kidney. And I'm just going to use black here. So actually each one of these tubes, it's actually meant to be where the tubes are. So the kidney, usually I teach that the kidney has three distinct layers, okay, or regions. One of those is the renal cortex. So the renal cortex is the superficial most layer. And how do you figure out where the renal cortex is? Well, you have to draw the middle or the medulla layer. And in order to do that, you essentially have to draw some triangular elements. These are called the renal pyramids. Okay. So basically at the end of each of these tubes, not in the U-shaped part, you're just going to draw a triangular shape and then kind of put some lines through it to help you see how the renal pyramids are striated or striped in their appearance, okay? So what that means is then we can start to come in here and maybe color code our different layers, our areas, so that we understand where they are. So basically like this, so going from the fibrous capsule to the renal pyramid, this purple part that I'm coloring, this is called the renal cortex. Okay, the renal cortex is glandular and mostly contains the nephrons. Then the next most layer is actually going to be comprised of two different structures. One of those structures I'm going to make in like this lighter green color, and I'm probably going to label it down here a little bit. No, the kidney's not green, but it's just easier. It's not purple either. It's just easier to label like this, right? So we have the renal pyramids. The renal pyramids primarily consist of collecting ducts and the nephron loop of the nephron, plus some blood vessels. They're striate in their appearance because they have so many collecting ducts. Then a little bit of the renal cortex actually will dip into the middle layer and goes between the renal pyramids. So this kind of green layer, this darker green layer here that I have, this is the renal columns. Okay. This is one renal column, so we'll just like erase that a little bit. But essentially, the renal pyramids and the renal columns make up the renal medulla. This is the thing that I've noticed students have the most difficult time understanding what's the medulla versus the pyramids. So what you can do is basically make like a C shape from the top of each of the pyramids you created all the way down like that to the bottom part of these tubes, essentially. Okay, so that C-shaped area right there, that's all green. There would be all those two different green colors. That's all the medulla right there. Then at the bottom of the renal pyramids, in case you're not quite sure, at the bottom of the renal pyramid right there, there's a little like roundish area. This is called the renal papilla. And that is at the base of the next layer. What I call the next layer is the renal pelvis. Okay. The renal pelvis is really this funnel shaped area right about here that is going to collect urine from all of the renal pyramids. So I didn't label this, but you could like go 1, 2, 3. Those are our 3 layers of the kidney. The renal pelvis is also going to include a couple of different tubes. So at the bottom of every single one of the pyramids, right, we put a tube around it. That small tube that goes around, so right there, is going to collect urine from a single renal pyramid. This is called a minor calyx or calyx, however you want to pronounce that, okay? When 2 minor calyces come together, so basically when you're going to collect urine from 2 or more, so like 2 or 3 renal pyramids, that forms our major calyx or calyx, okay? So you should see how urine is going to move if this is our urine. Urine is going to move from all of these individual tubes into a larger area tube and then into the renal pelvis. And technically, the ureter is going to come off past the hilum area. Okay, so in case you're not sure where the hilum is, remember the hilum is this depression right here where everything enters or exits out of the kidney. In some books, they call this the renal sinus, but I don't like that term. So I just call it the renal hilum. Okay. So that's the gross anatomy of the kidney in a nutshell. There's not too much else. I was gonna say there's not too much else, but that's pretty much it. Okay. Like I said, you see how like the renal medulla is made up of 2 things. So just color all that green all the way down and color the purple all the way down so that you can see the difference between the 3 different layers. Think about this for tests, especially lab practicals, like what is the structure versus what is the region or what is the layer, okay?